My name is Relindis, and I'm 29 years old. At the time this happened, I owned a luxury hotel in the mountains, the kind of place people booked months ahead for anniversaries, quiet winter weekends, and the kind of peace they couldn't find in their normal lives. That night, the snow was so heavy the roads had closed before dinner. Every room was full. Every couch in the lounge had already been claimed by someone stranded between towns. And just after 9, while I was standing near the office doorway with a tablet in my hand, checking emergency supply notes, 2 people started pounding on the front glass doors. My father, my mother, Conrad and Dilara. They were older than I remembered, of course. His hair had gone thin at the temples, her face had softened around the mouth, but some things do not age, some things stay exactly as they were. The way my father knocked, for example. Not like someone asking to come in. Like someone insulted the door had not opened for him already. Theo, my front desk manager, hurried around the counter. "I'm sorry," he said as he opened the inner door just enough to speak over the wind. "Are you both all right?" My father pushed past the question. "We need a room." Snow blew in around their coats. My mother had one hand pressed dramatically to her chest, her scarf wet at the edges, her eyes moving across the lobby as if measuring whether the place was good enough for her panic. Theo stayed polite, he was good at that, better than most people twice his age. "I'm very sorry, sir, we're fully booked tonight. The storm closures filled the last available room about 40 minutes ago." My father stared at him. "Fully booked?" "Yes, sir. This is a hotel." Theo paused just long enough to keep the silence from becoming disrespectful. "Yes, sir, it is." My mother made a small sound, half shiver, half accusation. "You can't expect us to stand outside in this weather." Nobody had asked them to stand outside. There were blankets stacked near the fireplace. Hot tea was being served at the side table. We had already arranged transport to the town warming center for 3 drivers whose cars were stuck by the pass. But my parents did not look at any of that. They looked at the marble floor, the brass lamps, the polished wood, the guests seated by the fire. They saw warmth, and they assumed it belonged to them. Theo said, "You're welcome to come in while we call around. I can check our affiliated motel and the emergency shelter list. We also have hot drinks and—" "No," my father cut in, "we are not going to a shelter." My mother's eyes sharpened with offense. "A shelter? Do we look like people who need charity?" I stood 15 feet away, behind the partial wall near the office, close enough to hear everything. Neither of them looked at me long enough to know me. That should not have surprised me. It did anyway. My father turned his head slightly, and I saw his profile against the gold light of the lobby. For 1 second I was 14 again, not in a memory exactly, more like my body remembered before my mind gave it permission. The cold. The porch light. The sound of a lock turning. I tightened my hand around the tablet until the edge pressed into my palm. Theo glanced toward me. It was a small glance, professional, careful. He knew enough of my history to know my parents existed. He did not know their faces, not until mine changed. And I was careful not to let it change too much. My mother stepped farther inside, dripping snow onto the rug. "No decent place leaves people outside in weather like this," she said. That was when the room became too quiet for me. Not silent, there were still sounds, the fire shifting, a spoon touching porcelain, wind pressing against the windows, someone at the bar lowering their voice. But inside me, something dropped into still water. No decent place leaves people outside in weather like this. I had heard that sentence before, or something close enough to it. Not from her. Never from her. Theo looked at me again. This time his face asked a question. I gave him the smallest nod. He reached for the phone on the front desk. My father noticed immediately. "Who are you calling?" Theo did not answer right away. He looked at me one last time. Then he picked up the phone. And before I tell you who he called, you need to understand why I did not step forward when I first saw them. Because sometimes people think the hardest part of seeing someone who hurt you is anger. It is not. Sometimes the hardest part is realizing there is still one small, embarrassed piece of you waiting for them to recognize you. To say your name. To look sorry before they know what you own. So stay with me, because this is not a story about revenge. It is about a door, a snowstorm, and the difference between giving someone shelter and letting them back inside your life. Now let me take you back 15 years. The last time my parents saw me in a snowstorm, I was 14 years old, standing outside their locked front door with no coat warm enough to survive the night. Back then, our house sat at the end of a narrow residential street where every lawn looked trimmed even in winter. My father liked that. He liked things that looked orderly from the outside. The white shutters, the swept porch, the brass number plate by the door. The 2 matching planters my mother changed every season, even when she said money was tight. People used to tell me I was lucky to live there. I learned early that people say that when they see the outside of a house. Inside, our home had rules that were never written down. Do not make your mother upset. Do not question your father in front of people. Do not ask for things twice. Do not look disappointed when plans change. Do not cry where anyone can see you. And above all, do not make the family look bad. My father, Conrad, believed reputation was a kind of currency. He spent it carefully and expected everyone else to protect it. At dinner, he sat at the head of the table even when it was just the 3 of us. He read bills with a pen in his hand. He corrected grammar. He corrected posture. He corrected silence if he thought it sounded disrespectful. My mother, Ilara, was softer in the way. A curtain is softer than a locked door. She sighed instead of shouted. She touched her forehead when she wanted me to stop speaking. She said things like, "I just can't handle this tonight," even when this was me needing help with school forms or asking why she had promised to pick me up and forgotten. When I was little, I thought being a good daughter meant making myself easy. Easy to feed. Easy to dress. Easy to forget in a room. I kept my school papers in neat folders. I did my homework at the kitchen table without music. I learned which floorboards creaked in the hall, so I could walk quietly after my parents had started arguing in low voices. No one ever told me I was unwanted. That would have been too honest. Instead, I was made to feel like a badly timed question. There was only one place where I did not feel that way. My grandmother's guest house. It was not grand, not then. It was an old, narrow building on the edge of town with 6 rooms, a small front desk, a dining room that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and radiators that knocked in the walls during winter. But to me, it felt like the safest place in the world. My grandmother kept a tin of butter cookies under the front desk, even though she pretended they were for guests. She let me fold towels badly until I learned to fold them well. She taught me how to write room numbers on little cream-colored cards, how to ring the brass bell without making it sound rude, and how to tell whether a traveler wanted conversation or quiet just by the way they set down their bag. People arrive carrying more than luggage, she told me once. I did not understand that fully then. I just liked that she explained people gently. My favorite thing was the keyboard behind the desk. Each room had an old brass key with a small oval tag. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. The keys were heavy in a way modern key cards are not. They had weight, they had teeth, they felt like they belonged to something solid. One afternoon, when I was 11, I found my grandmother polishing one key that did not hang with the others. It was smaller, older, and darker than the rest. "What room is that one for?" I asked. She looked at it for a while before answering. "For someone who needs to remember they have somewhere to go." I smiled because I thought she was joking. She opened my hand and placed it in my palm. The key was warm from her fingers. "It's yours now," she said. "I don't have a room here." She closed my fingers around it. A room key is not just metal, Relindis. It means someone thought you were worth keeping warm. I remember looking down at it, embarrassed by how much I wanted to cry. At home, warmth had to be earned. You had to be pleasant enough, quiet enough, useful enough. At my grandmother's guest house, warmth was just something she gave people when they came in from the cold. I wore the key on a thin ribbon under my shirt for a while, until my father noticed the outline of it one morning before school. What is that? I pulled it out carefully. Grandmother gave it to me. He held out his hand, and I gave it to him because I was still young enough to believe adults only asked for things they had a right to touch. He turned it over once. This is from the guest house. Yes. My mother looked up from her coffee. She gave you a key. There was a strange tone in her voice. Not jealousy exactly. Interest. My father placed it back in my hand, but more slowly than he had taken it. Don't lose it, he said. That was all. But later that night, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. The dishwasher was running. They probably thought the sound covered their voices. It's sentimental nonsense, my father said. My mother answered, your mother always did things like that, making promises without thinking who has to deal with them later. She should have sold that place when she had the chance. It's worth more than she admits. I stood in the hallway with the key pressed between my fingers. I did not understand all of it. Not then. I only understood that the key had changed once they knew about it. In my hand it had felt like belonging. In theirs it sounded like value. Not the kind that means love. The kind people argue over after someone dies. When my grandmother passed away 2 years later, the guest house felt colder than any room I had ever entered. The front desk still had her ledger on it. Her handwriting still leaned slightly to the right. There was a blue mug near the sink that nobody had washed because nobody wanted to admit she would not come back to finish the tea inside it. I cried in the pantry where the extra napkins were kept. My mother found me there and stood in the doorway. Relindis, she said softly but not gently, please don't make this harder for everyone. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I'm sorry. She looked relieved as soon as I apologized. That was how it usually worked. My grief became manageable once I made it smaller. After the funeral, my father spent more time talking to relatives than sitting with me. I heard words like estate, repairs, taxes, offer, transfer. Adults lowered their voices when I entered rooms, then smiled too quickly. At home, folders appeared on the dining table. My father made phone calls from his study with the door half closed. My mother kept saying, your grandmother was complicated, which seemed to mean she had loved people in ways my parents could not control. One evening I passed the kitchen and heard my father say that guest house should never have been left to sentiment. I stopped walking. My mother murmured something I could not hear. Then he said it should have stayed where it belonged. I stood there with my backpack still on one shoulder, my hand moving without thought to the small brass key hidden in my coat pocket. I did not know yet that this key would be the only thing I carried with me into the snow. I did not know that one winter night, the same parents discussing warmth, family, and what belonged to them would lock their 14-year-old daughter outside and go back into the house. I only knew that the key felt heavier than it used to. And for the first time, I wondered if my grandmother had given it to me because she had seen something I had not. Not yet. But soon. Very soon. For a few weeks after that, I started carrying the key everywhere. Not around my neck anymore. That had made it too easy for people to see. I kept it in the inside pocket of my winter coat, the one with a torn seam near the bottom. Sometimes during school, I would reach in and touch it while a teacher talked about equations or history dates or essay structure. I did it without thinking. My fingers would find the teeth of it, the rounded head, the small scratch near the edge. It helped me remember that I had once belonged somewhere without needing to earn it. At home, nothing changed in a way anyone else would have noticed. My father still left for work at 7:30. My mother still wrote grocery lists on the magnetic pad stuck to the fridge. I still took my shoes off by the back door and lined them up straight, because my father hated seeing them crooked. But the air in the house felt different to me. There were more papers. More closed doors. More phone calls that stopped when I walked into the room. Sometimes my father would ask ordinary questions that did not feel ordinary. Did your grandmother ever talk to you about the guest house? I would look up from my homework. Sometimes. What did she say? I tried to answer carefully. She told me about guests and the rooms, and how to clean the desk bell without scratching it. His mouth would tighten just a little. Anything else? I would shake my head. No. He would watch me for another second, then look away as if I had disappointed him without knowing the assignment. My mother was worse because she acted kinder when she wanted something. She would sit beside me at the kitchen table while I was doing homework and touch the edge of my notebook. You know your father is under a lot of stress. I knew that sentence. It always arrived before I was expected to be easier. I know, I said. He feels your grandmother made some things more complicated than they needed to be. I kept my pencil still. She loved the guest house. My mother sighed, not loudly, just enough. Love is not the same as responsibility, Relindis. I did not know what to say to that. At 14, I still believed adults used words because they understood them better than I did. Responsibility, family, respect, gratitude. Those words were used often in our house. They were never explained, but they always seemed to point toward me being wrong. That winter came in early. By late November, the windows had frost in the corners every morning. My breath fogged the bathroom mirror while I brushed my teeth. The radiators clicked at night, and my mother complained that heating bills were impossible with everyone acting like money grew out of the walls. She said everyone, but she looked at me. I started eating breakfast faster. I stopped asking for rides unless it was raining hard. When I needed something signed for school, I left the form on the counter with a sticky note and hoped one of them would notice it before the deadline. If they forgot, I learned to explain it to teachers with a calm face. My parents have been busy. That was usually enough. People did not ask many questions when your clothes were clean and your grades were good. One Friday afternoon, my mother told me we were having relatives over the next evening. Just a small dinner, she said, standing in the doorway of my room. She had not knocked, she rarely did. I was sitting on the floor sorting laundry into piles. Whites, darks, school uniform pieces that had to be washed separately because my mother said replacing them would be a waste. Who's coming? I asked. Your Uncle Martin, Aunt Cecile, maybe two of your father's cousins. That was not small. I folded a sweater over my knees. Is it for something? My mother's expression shifted. Not anger. Warning. It's family, does there need to be a reason? No, I said quickly. She looked around my room as if checking for evidence of something. Her eyes paused on my coat hanging from the chair. I had started keeping it in my room. Before it stayed downstairs with everyone else. Wear something decent tomorrow, she said, and please don't sit there looking miserable. People are already concerned about you. I looked down at the sweater. Concerned. They know you were close to your grandmother. I nodded. And your father doesn't need you making the evening heavy. There it was again. Heavy, harder, difficult. Words people used when your pain had become inconvenient furniture they wanted moved out of the room. I won't, I said. My mother softened as soon as I promised to disappear in the right way. Good girl. She closed the door. I stayed on the floor for a while after that. The laundry smelled like detergent and the faint cedar blocks my mother kept in drawers. Downstairs, a cabinet opened and shut. My father's voice came from the hall, low and clipped, then disappeared behind the study door. I went to my coat. The key was still in the inside pocket. I took it out and held it under the desk lamp. It looked almost ordinary there. Just a small brass key with worn edges and an old-fashioned shape. It did not glow. It did not explain itself. It did not tell me what my grandmother had known or why my parents said her love had made things complicated. I put it back carefully. Then I zipped the pocket shut. The next day, the house prepared itself for guests the way my mother prepared herself for public life. Everything became cleaner than it needed to be. The silverware was polished. The hallway mirror was wiped twice. My father replaced a bulb above the front porch, because he said the old one made the entrance look neglected. My mother moved through the rooms with a list in her hand, assigning small jobs without calling them jobs. Relindis, take these coats upstairs. Relindis, set out the water glasses. Relindis, don't use those napkins, the linen ones. I did each thing. I knew how to move through a room quietly. I knew how to listen for tone. I knew when a drawer was closed too hard because someone was angry, and when it was closed too softly because someone was trying not to seem angry. By 5, snow had started falling. At first it was light, the kind that looked pretty from inside. My mother said it made the house feel festive. My father checked the weather on his phone and frowned. They said it wouldn't turn until later. Will people still come? I asked. He looked at me. Why wouldn't they? I said nothing. Guests arrived with cold cheeks and loud greetings. The house filled with perfume, wool coats, wet boots, adult voices. My mother became brighter. My father became smoother. He laughed in a way I never heard when it was only us. People hugged me carefully. Oh, Relindis, you're getting so tall. Your grandmother would have been proud. Such a hard time for everyone. For everyone. I smiled because that was what my mother wanted from across the room. Dinner began normally. Roast chicken, green beans, potatoes in a ceramic dish my mother only used when people came over. My father opened wine. Someone complimented the table. Someone mentioned the guest house. It happened so casually I almost missed the shift. Uncle Martin said, "Any news on what's being done with the place?" My father set down his glass. Still being sorted. Aunt Cecile gave a sympathetic nod. Your mother was attached to that building. She was sentimental, my father said. There was a pause. Not long. But I felt it. My fork rested against my plate. My mother looked at me once quickly. A warning before I had even spoken. My father continued, voice even. It's unfortunate when emotion interferes with practical decisions. A property like that should be managed by someone who understands value. I do not know why I said anything. Most of the time I did not. Maybe it was because the snow was tapping softly against the dining room windows. Maybe it was because my grandmother's name had been turned into a floor too many times. Maybe it was because the key was upstairs in my coat pocket, and even from there I could feel the weight of it. She understood value, I said. The room quieted. Not completely, just enough. My father turned his eyes to me. What was that? I swallowed. She let people stay even when they couldn't pay right away. She said sometimes warmth mattered first. My mother's face went pale in that controlled way that meant I had stepped outside the lines. My father smiled. It was not a kind smile. That is exactly what I mean, he said. A cousin gave a small awkward laugh, trying to help. No one knew where to look. My father leaned back in his chair. Your grandmother was generous. No one is questioning that, but generosity without judgment is how people lose what should have stayed in the family. My mother's voice came soft beside him. Relindis, sweetheart, this isn't really a child's conversation. Sweetheart. In front of people, she always remembered words like that. Heat crawled up my neck. I just meant she cared about it. My father's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. And you think we do? That was the moment I should have apologized. I knew it as clearly as I knew my own name. The apology was right there, small, familiar, easy. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I misunderstood. But for once, the words did not come quickly enough. And my father noticed. Outside, the snow thickened against the dark windows. Inside, my mother lowered her eyes to her plate, as if she had already decided not to see what would happen next. I do not remember what I said after my father asked me that. I think I whispered no. I think I looked down at my plate. There are moments your mind keeps perfectly, and moments it blurs on purpose. That dinner became both. I remember the knife beside my plate. I remember a drop of gravy on the tablecloth near my uncle's wrist. I remember my mother's fingers resting flat beside her glass, too still. I remember my father taking a slow drink of wine before he said anything else. That is what grief does, he said, speaking to the table more than to me. It makes children confuse feelings with facts. Aunt Cecile murmured something soft. My father smiled like the evening was still under control. She misses her grandmother, my mother added, her voice gentle enough for the room. She doesn't always know how to express it. That was worse than being corrected. She made me sound small, unstable, something to be managed. I said I'm sorry. This time the words came. They came too late. My father nodded once, like he was accepting a payment after the due date. The dinner continued, but not really. People talked around the space I had made. Forks moved, glasses were refilled, someone asked about road conditions. My father answered calmly, checking his phone and saying the storm was moving faster than expected. No one mentioned the guest house again. No one mentioned my grandmother. After dessert, the relatives began leaving in a hurry because the snow had turned heavy. Coats came down from the guest room. Boots were found near the back mat. My mother stood in the hall with her hostess face on, kissing cheeks and saying, "Drive carefully," like she had not spent the last hour pretending I was a problem she had to smooth over. My uncle touched my shoulder on his way out. "Be good for your parents," he said. I nodded. I do not think he meant harm. That was part of what made it lonely. People could stand close enough to touch you and still miss everything. By the time the last car pulled away, the street was almost white. Tire tracks filled in quickly. The porch light made the snow look yellow as it fell through the dark. Inside, the house settled into a different silence. Not peaceful. Waiting. My mother gathered plates from the dining room. I stood to help because helping was usually safer than standing still. "I'll clear," I said. She did not look at me. "Go upstairs." Her voice was quiet. That scared me more than if she had snapped. I carried my water glass to the sink anyway. My hands felt awkward, like they belonged to someone else. The dishwasher was already open, the bottom rack pulled out. A fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the tile. My father looked up from the dining room. "Leave it." I froze. "It was an accident," I said. I said leave it. My mother closed her eyes for half a second. Not because she was angry at him. Because I had made another sound. I backed away from the sink. My father came into the kitchen slowly. He had removed his tie but not his anger. That was still neat, controlled, folded into his voice. "Do you understand what you did tonight?" I kept my eyes on the counter. I apologized. "That is not what I asked." My mother picked up a cloth and began wiping a clean section of counter. Small circles, same spot over and over. I said I shouldn't have interrupted. "You embarrassed me." The sentence landed flat. Not loud. Worse than loud. "You embarrassed this family," he said. I looked up without meaning to. "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to, that is your excuse for everything." My chest felt tight, but I made myself breathe through my nose. Crying would make it worse. Explaining would make it worse. Silence would probably make it worse too, but silence at least gave me less to regret. My mother finally spoke. "Relindis, your father has carried enough this year." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because for a second I thought of my grandmother's guest house after she died. The ledger, the blue mug, the pantry where I had cried into my sleeve so no one would have to carry me. "I miss her too," I said. My mother's face changed. There was a quick flash of impatience under the softness. "This is exactly what I mean. You turn everything back to yourself." My father set his glass on the counter. "You are 14. You have no idea what responsibility means. No idea what things cost. You sit there talking about warmth like the world pays its bills with feelings." I did not answer. He stepped closer. "Do you know what happens to people who think that way?" I shook my head. They learned. The word was simple. It was also the moment something in the room shifted. My mother stopped wiping. "Conrad," she said, but not like a warning. More like she wanted him to choose a version of anger that would not make too much mess. He looked toward the hallway where the coats hung. "Get your coat." I thought I had misunderstood. "What? Get your coat." My mother's mouth parted slightly. The heat from the kitchen vent touched my ankles. I remember that. Warm air moving gently across the floor while I stood there trying to understand why my father was telling me to dress for the storm. Why, I asked. His face hardened. Because you need to cool off. I looked at my mother. She looked at the counter. Mom. She folded the cloth once, then again. Just do what your father says. I went upstairs because I did not know what else to do. My room was dark except for the desk lamp I had left on. The laundry was still folded in piles near the bed. My school bag leaned against the chair. My coat hung over the back of it, the inside pocket zipped. For a strange second I moved slowly, like if I did each step carefully, the whole thing might turn back into a misunderstanding. I put my arms through the sleeves. The coat was not thick. It was the one I wore to school, dark blue with cuffs that had started to fray. I touched the inside pocket. The key was there. I did not take gloves. I do not know why. Maybe because I thought I would only be outside for a minute. Maybe because part of me still believed my mother would stop him before the door closed. Downstairs, my father was waiting by the front hall. My mother stood behind him. Her arms were crossed, not in anger, in self-protection. You're being dramatic, she said, though I had not said anything. My father opened the front door. Cold came into the house immediately. It moved around my ankles under my coat, into the warm hall where the family photographs hung in neat black frames. He gestured outside. 10 minutes. I stared at him. What? You stand outside for 10 minutes and think about respect? The porch was already covered in snow. Beyond it, the yard disappeared into white. The streetlights were blurry circles. The wind pushed flakes sideways across the steps. Dad, it's freezing. Then you will remember the lesson. I looked at my mother again. I was not asking her to fight him. Not really. I was asking for her to say one small thing, that it was enough, that I had apologized, that it was too cold, that I was her daughter. She touched her necklace. Don't make this worse, Relindis. That sentence did something to me. Not all at once. Quietly. Like a hairline crack in glass. I stepped onto the porch. My boots sank into snow up to the soles. The cold bit through my tights right away. I turned back, expecting the door to stay open. It did not. My father closed it. The lock clicked. I stood facing the door. At first I was too shocked to knock. The porch light buzzed faintly above me. Snow gathered on my sleeves. Through the narrow window beside the door, I could see the warm hallway and the edge of my mother's shoulder. I knocked once. Not hard. Dad. No answer. I waited. The wind moved against my back. I knocked again. Mom. Inside, shadows moved, someone passed the window, then the hall light turned off. That was when I understood 10 minutes had not meant 10 minutes. Or maybe it had, and they simply trusted the cold to do what they would not say out loud. I stayed on the porch until my fingers started to ache. Then I knocked harder. I'm sorry, I called. My voice sounded thin against the storm. I'm sorry, okay, I won't do it again. The house did not answer. Behind the front curtains, a shape appeared. My mother. I knew it was her from the tilt of her head. For 1 second I thought she was coming. Then the curtains shifted back into place. I do not remember deciding to leave the porch. I remember stepping down. I remember the snow slipping under the edge of my boot. I remember looking back at the house and seeing every window glowing warm. Like nothing unusual had happened inside. There was a bus stop 3 blocks away. I had stood there before after school. It had a metal bench and a cloudy plastic shelter with scratches carved into it. In my mind it became a destination, not safe exactly, just somewhere that was not the front door. So I walked. The snow made the street quiet. My breath came out in short white bursts. My ears hurt first, then my fingers. I put my hands in my pockets and found the brass key. I closed my hand around it. It was so cold it almost burned. By the time I reached the bus stop, my legs were shaking. I sat on the bench because standing felt too hard. The shelter blocked some of the wind, but not enough. Snow blew in through the open side and stuck to my coat. A car slowed once. Its headlights washed over me. I lifted my head. The car kept going. I do not blame them, not exactly. A girl at a bus stop in a storm is something people can explain away if they need to. Waiting for a ride, being dramatic, someone else's problem. Time became strange after that. I tried counting passing headlights, but there were not many. I tried putting my hands under my arms, but I did not want to let go of the key. My fingers had gone stiff around it. At some point, I stopped crying because the tears hurt my face. Then a different light filled the shelter. Not passing. Stopping. A woman's voice came through the storm. Sweetheart. I opened my eyes. An older woman stood near the curb in a long coat, one hand holding her hood against the wind. Her car door was open behind her, spilling warm yellow light onto the snow. She did not ask what I had done. She did not ask whether I was lying. She looked at my face, my hands, my thin coat, and her expression changed. Oh, honey, she said, you're freezing. I tried to say I was fine. Nothing came out right. She came closer slowly, like I was something frightened. My name is Maren, she said. I run the inn off Briar Road. I'm going to get you warm first, and then we'll figure out everything else. Warm first. Not questions first. Not blame first. Warm first. She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. It smelled faintly like cedar and clean laundry. When she guided me toward the car, my hand opened without me meaning it to. The brass key dropped into my lap once I was seated. Maren saw it. She picked it up gently, turning it over in the dashboard light. This yours? I nodded. My grandmother gave it to me. Maren placed it back in my palm and folded my fingers over it. Then hold on to it, she said. Her voice was steady. Someone gave you that for a reason. Outside, the snow kept falling. But the car was warm. And for the first time that night, someone stayed. Maren did not drive fast. That was one of the first things I noticed once the shaking in my body became less violent. She kept both hands on the wheel and leaned forward a little, watching the road through the moving snow. Every few seconds her eyes flicked to me, then back to the windshield. Stay awake for me, she said once. I tried to nod. My lips felt strange, heavy, like they belonged to someone else. She turned the heat higher. The vents blew warm air against my knees, and the blanket around my shoulders began to thaw the outside of me before the inside knew what to do with it. The inn on Briar Road was not large. I had seen it before from the bus, mostly in passing. A low building with green shutters, a wooden sign, and 2 lamps by the entrance that stayed on even in bad weather. Maren parked near the side door. Don't move yet, she said. She came around, opened my door, and helped me out as if I might break if she moved too quickly. Inside, the inn smelled like coffee, old wood, and laundry soap. There was a narrow hallway behind the front desk, a little office with a wall calendar, a stack of reservation cards, and a mug full of pens. A radio played low near the shelves. Somewhere deeper in the building, pipes clicked in the walls. Maren sat me in a chair by a small heater and put another blanket over my lap. Wet boots off, she said gently. I started trying to untie them, but my fingers would not work. She knelt without making a big deal of it and did it for me. That almost made me cry again. Not because she touched my boots. Because she did not act like helping me was a burden. She brought dry socks from a laundry basket, a towel for my hair, and tea in a thick white mug. She set everything close, not forcing me to take it before I was ready. Then she picked up the phone. That was when fear came back. Please don't call them, I said. My voice came out rough. Maren looked at me carefully. Your parents? I nodded. I'll go home, I just need a minute. Even as I said it, I knew it sounded wrong. My coat was soaked, my legs were still trembling, I could not feel the tips of 2 fingers on my left hand. But at 14, home still felt like the place I was supposed to return to, even after it had pushed me out. Maren did not argue. She sat across from me. What happened tonight? I looked down at the mug. The tea had steam coming from it. I watched it curl up and vanish. I made my father angry. Maren waited. That was all. No sharp breath, no raised eyebrow, no what did you do, just waiting. I swallowed. There was dinner, family. I said something I shouldn't have. What did you say? I rubbed my thumb over the handle of the mug. That my grandmother cared about keeping people warm. Maren's face changed, but only a little. And they put you outside for that. I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect the story from sounding as bad as it was. He said 10 minutes, I whispered, but they locked the door. Maren looked away for a second. When she looked back, her voice was still calm. I need to make some calls. My stomach tightened. To who? First, someone medical. You were out there long enough that I want a professional opinion. Then the proper people for a minor found in a storm. I flinched at the word proper. It sounded like forms, questions, adults sitting at tables, my parents speaking better than I could. Maren seemed to understand. I'm not handing you over to anyone without knowing you're safe. That was the first promise she made me. She kept it. The rest of that night came in pieces. A paramedic checked my fingers and asked me simple questions. My name, my age, the date, whether I had hit my head. He wrapped my hands in warm towels and told Maren I needed rest, food and watching. A police officer came later, leaving wet footprints near the back door. He was polite but tired. He had the look of someone who had already decided most family emergencies were messier than the paperwork allowed. He asked what happened. I told him the truth badly. I kept stopping to make it smaller. My father was angry. I went outside. The door was locked. I waited. I walked. Maren stood near the counter, not interrupting, but not leaving me alone either. When the officer called my parents, his tone changed. I could hear only his side. Yes, sir. She is here. No, sir, she is cold but conscious. A pause. I understand. Another pause. I'm required to document that. When he hung up, he did not look at me right away. That told me enough. Later, I learned what my father said. That I had stormed out. That I was emotional over my grandmother. That they thought I had gone to cool off and then disappeared. That the door was locked because of the weather, not because they were keeping me out. My mother cried in the background. I was told that part too. Not loudly, just enough to be heard. The officer wrote things down. Maren asked for his name, badge number, and case reference. She wrote them on the back of an old reservation card and slipped it into a drawer. That was how Maren handled fear. She made records. She put dates on things. She kept copies. I slept in room 3 that night. Not well. Every time the radiator clicked, I woke up thinking someone had turned a lock. In the morning, Maren brought toast, eggs, and orange juice on a tray. She did not sit on the bed. She set the tray on the desk and opened the curtains halfway. The snow had stopped. The world outside was painfully bright. You don't have to eat all of it, she said, just try. I asked, am I going back? Maren was quiet for a moment. Not today. I looked at her. She held my gaze. Not until I know what today means. That answer should have scared me. Instead, it let me breathe. The days after that were not simple. Stories like this make it sound like one kind stranger rescues you and then the cruel people disappear. That is not how it happened. There were meetings. Calls. A school counselor with a box of tissues on her desk. A temporary placement agreement. A woman from child services who smelled like peppermint gum and kept saying, "We need to establish facts." My parents arrived at one meeting in clean coats, looking tired and wronged. My mother cried before anyone asked her a question. My father spoke in full sentences. He used words like misunderstanding, discipline, grief response, and family matter. I sat across the table, and felt myself becoming smaller with every word. Then Marin said she was found at a bus stop in a blizzard. The room quieted. She had no gloves, Marin continued. Her coat was wet through, her hands were stiff around a key. Whatever language you use, that is what happened. No one had ever put the truth on a table like that for me. Not angrily. Just firmly. After that, I stayed with Marin longer. Temporary became through the end of the semester. Then through summer. Then no one said temporary as often. Marin did not try to become my mother. That mattered. She did not crowd me with affection or demand gratitude because she had helped me. She gave me routines. At 6:30, towels came out of the dryer. At 7, the coffee urn was filled. At 8, checkouts began. I learned how to strip a room without mixing clean linen with used. I learned how to write names carefully in the reservation book. I learned that difficult guests often got quieter if you lowered your own voice instead of raising it. Hospitality is not letting people walk over you, Marin told me one afternoon after a man complained about a bill he had signed himself. It's giving people dignity while keeping the line where it belongs. I did not understand then how much I would need that sentence. I kept the brass key in a small wooden box beside my bed. Some nights I took it out and held it. I still missed my grandmother in a way that made my ribs ache. I still wondered if my parents were waiting for me to apologize correctly enough to come home. Then, almost 8 months after the storm, Marin and I went to the old guest house to sort through what was left. The building smelled closed up, dust, paper, old curtains. My grandmother's ledger was still behind the front desk, sealed in a plastic sleeve now. Marin brought labeled folders, trash bags, gloves, and a thermos of coffee. Practical things, safe things, We were in the small office when she found the envelope. It was inside a metal filing box beneath insurance papers and repair receipts. My name was written across the front in my grandmother's handwriting. Relindis. Marin did not open it. She handed it to me. My fingers shook more than they had in the snow. Inside were documents I barely understood then. Trust papers, a deed reference, a letter from a lawyer, my grandmother's signature in blue ink. And a note. Not long. Just enough. My darling girls. Some doors should never depend on the people standing on the other side of them. Marin read the legal pages twice. Then she looked at me. Relindis, she said quietly, your grandmother left the guest house to you. I stared at the paper. That was the moment I understood something I had not been ready to understand before. My grandmother had not only loved me. She had prepared for the possibility that love might need protection. Years moved after that, but not quickly. I finished school. I worked the front desk on weekends. I studied hospitality because I liked the order of it. Reservations, calendars, receipts, guest notes, problems with solutions attached. Marin helped me protect the guest house before anyone could touch it. Lawyers filed papers. Repairs were delayed until money existed. Some rooms stayed closed for years. Nothing about it was glamorous. There were leaks, loan applications, contractors who did not call back, paint samples taped to walls. Nights when Marin and I ate soup from mugs because the kitchen sink was full of tools. Eventually, her inn and my grandmother's guest house became one project. Not mine alone. Not hers alone. Something built between the woman who had stopped in the snow and the woman who had left me a key before I knew why I needed it. On the first renovation plan, the designer marked a small rectangle behind the future front desk. For art, she said. I looked at the brass key lying beside the blueprints. No, I said softly, for this. Marin looked at me across the table. Neither of us smiled. Not quite. But she reached over and turned the key so it faced the right way. And for the first time, I could imagine a lobby where no child would ever have to wonder if warmth belonged to them. The first winter after the hotel opened, I learned that luxury did not remove emergencies. It only made them arrive under better lighting. People still lost keys, pipes still froze, guests still arrived tired, frightened, angry, hungry, or ashamed. Snow still covered roads without asking who had a reservation. And when weather turned dangerous, people stopped caring about the thread count of the sheets. They cared whether someone answered the phone. By the time I was 29, I knew every sound the building made in a storm. The low groan of wind pressing against the west windows. The small click of the automatic doors sealing again. The elevator chime carrying too clearly through the lobby after midnight. The fireplace settling after a fresh log was placed behind the screen. I also knew what panic looked like before people called it panic. A guest checking the weather every 2 minutes. A father trying to smile while his children asked if they would make it home. A woman staring at her phone after 3 cancelled rides in a row. That was why we had rules. Not cold rules, not the kind my father liked. Practical ones. Every winter we updated the severe weather binder. It lived under the front desk in a black cover with silver tape on the spine. Inside were road closure contacts, emergency shelter numbers, affiliated motel agreements, shuttle driver lists, medical contacts, backup generator instructions, and a printed room report in case the system went down. Marin used to say, kindness that cannot find the phone number is just good intentions. So we kept phone numbers. We kept blankets in the cedar chest by the lobby fireplace. We kept tea urns filled when the forecast turned ugly. We kept a shelf of spare gloves, socks and hand warmers in the service closet beside housekeeping. Nobody had to explain why they needed them. That mattered to me. The night my parents came back, the storm had been building since mid-afternoon. At 4, the county alert came through on my phone. Heavy snow, whiteout conditions, mountain pass closed, non-essential travel discouraged. By 5:30, every room was occupied. By 6, the restaurant had stopped taking outside reservations. By 7, Theo had started a handwritten overflow list at the front desk, in case stranded travelers called after the booking system showed full. He was 26, careful, and kind in a way he tried to hide behind efficiency. He had started with us as a night auditor while finishing school, and he had the steady temperament needed for storms and difficult guests. Last confirmed check-in just arrived, he told me, tapping the screen. Room 214, 2 adults, 1 child, 1 dog that was absolutely not listed. I looked over the desk. Charge the pet fee tomorrow. He smiled, already added a note, they looked frozen. Then tomorrow. He nodded like that made sense. A few feet away, a little boy sat cross-legged on the lobby rug, feeding crackers to a stuffed dinosaur, while his parents warmed their hands around paper cups of tea. Near the fireplace, 2 older women shared a phone charger and argued quietly about whether their husbands had been right to ignore the first weather alert. The lobby was full but calm. That was always the goal. Not silence. Calm. The brass key hung behind the front desk in a narrow glass case set into the wood. Most guests assumed it was decorative. Some asked about it. I usually told them it came from the original guest house and left it there. I did not tell them about my grandmother's hand closing around mine. I did not tell them about the bus stop. I did not tell them Marin had been the one to decide it should be placed where staff could see it, not guests. A reminder, she had said. For me. For anyone working the desk. That night the key caught the firelight every time someone crossed the room. At 7:40, I moved through the lobby with my tablet, checking the list Theo had built. Warming center, I asked. Open until midnight unless they extend. Call and ask them to extend before they're overwhelmed. Already did, they're deciding in 15. Affiliated motel. 6 rooms left as of 10 minutes ago. Roads are bad, but their shuttle can still do local transfer if we coordinate through the south route. Good, keep the number at the top. He wrote it down. In the kitchen, Chef Olmer had switched from plated desserts to soup and bread for stranded guests who had not eaten. Housekeeping had brought extra pillows to the lounge. Maintenance checked the generator twice, then checked it again because Victor, our maintenance lead, trusted machines less than people. At 8:15, the front doors opened, and 2 college students stumbled in covered in snow. They had slid into a ditch half a mile down the road. Theo got their names, called roadside assistance, and put them near the fire with blankets over their knees. At 8:30, a woman came in crying because her husband's insulin was in their car and the car was stuck behind a closure. We called the local clinic, then the sheriff's non-emergency line, then found a volunteer driver with chains. It was not dramatic in the way people think emergencies are dramatic. It was forms and calls and checking spelling. It was asking, when did he last take it? It was saying, stay here, I'll come back with an answer. It was keeping your voice steady, because someone else's fear had nowhere to sit. By 9, the snow had thickened into a white wall beyond the glass. I stood near the office doorway, reviewing the updated overflow list, when I heard knocking. Hard. Not frightened. Demanding. Theo looked up first. I followed his eyes to the front doors. 2 figures stood outside under the portico lights. The wind pushed snow around them in sharp bursts. The man raised his fist and hit the glass again, though the automatic doors had already begun to open. Something in my body went still before my mind understood. He stepped inside first, brushing snow from his shoulders with irritation instead of relief. Older, thinner through the face, same posture. My father. My mother came in behind him, holding her scarf at her throat, her expression drawn tight with cold and offense. Her hair was tucked under a wool hat. Snow clung to the edges of her coat. Ilara. For a moment the lobby disappeared. Not completely. I still saw the lamps, the fire, the dark wood, Theo behind the desk. But underneath all of it I saw a porch light. I heard a lock. My fingers moved toward the side of my coat, though the brass key was no longer in my pocket. It was behind glass now, safer than I had been. My father approached the desk. We need a room. Theo straightened. Of course, let me check what we can do for you. You can give us a room, my father said. Theo's expression did not change. I'm sorry, sir, we are fully committed tonight because of the road closures. My mother let out a small breath. Fully committed. Yes, ma'am. This is a hotel, my father said, each word clipped. Theo nodded once, yes, sir. I should have stepped forward then. That was the professional thing to do. But my feet stayed where they were. Neither of them looked at me. Not really. My mother glanced across the lobby, past me, over me, through me, the way she used to when she entered my room and saw only a mess she wanted corrected. My father kept his attention on Theo. We are not asking for a favor, he said. We are paying guests. I understand, Theo said, but all rooms are occupied. I can offer hot drinks while I call our affiliated motel. They had availability a short time ago. We also have transportation options if the south route remains open. A motel, my mother said. She looked toward the fireplace, where guests sat wrapped in hotel blankets. We have been driving for hours. I understand, Theo said again. You're welcome to warm up here while I call. My father's jaw shifted. I don't think you do understand. My wife is exhausted. The roads are unsafe. We need a proper room. Theo kept his voice even. I can also contact the warming center. They've extended hours because of the storm. My mother looked genuinely insulted. A shelter. No, ma'am, a warming center. It's staffed, heated and... We are not sleeping in some public hall, my father said. A few guests nearby became quieter. Not staring. Listening. I watched Theo do exactly what he had been trained to do. He did not argue, he did not defend himself. He kept the line clear. I'm sorry the options aren't ideal, but I can help you get somewhere safe. Safe. The word moved through me slowly. My parents did not react to it, the way people react when safety is what they need. They reacted like safety was beneath them. My mother pulled off one glove finger by finger. No decent hotel leaves people out in weather like this. Her voice had that same soft edge. Public softness. The kind that made other people lean toward her before they understood what she was doing. Theo looked down briefly at the monitor, then back at her. You are not being left outside, ma'am. You're welcome to wait here while we arrange. My husband asked for a room. Yes, and I'm explaining that we don't have one available. My father leaned one hand on the desk. Then find the owner. I felt the sentence before I heard the rest of it. Theo paused. Just a fraction. My father continued, there is always someone who can make an exception. My mother looked past Theo, toward the wall behind him. Her eyes moved over the framed licenses, the winter floral arrangement, the small stack of guest comment cards. Then they stopped on the glass case. On the brass key. She stared at it a little too long. Not recognition yet. Something closer to discomfort. My pulse changed. Theo turned his head slightly, not enough for them to notice. His eyes found mine near the office doorway. He did not speak. He did not need to. Behind him, the old key waited in its frame, catching the firelight like it remembered everything. I stepped out from the office doorway. Not quickly. Not slowly either. Just enough that Theo could stop carrying the weight of the room alone. My father's eyes moved to me the way people look at staff when they expect staff to solve something before it becomes inconvenient. He did not pause. He did not blink in recognition. He did not search my face. That hurt more than I expected. Not sharply. Quietly. Like finding an old bruise with your thumb. Good evening, I said. I'm Relindis, I own the hotel. My mother looked at me then. Only for a second. Her eyes moved over my face, my dark blazer, the tablet in my hand, then drifted back toward the front desk. I watched her dismiss me as someone professional and unfamiliar. My father straightened. Then you can fix this. Theo stepped half a pace back, but he stayed close enough to hear everything. That mattered, not because I needed protection, because a front desk should never feel abandoned by the person who trains it. I understand this is a difficult night, I said, but Theo has given you the correct information. We do not have an available room. My father's mouth tightened. Hotels always have rooms held back. Not tonight. For emergencies. This is an emergency weather event, I said. That is why every room is already occupied. My mother gave a short, injured laugh. So your policy is to help everyone except the people standing in front of you? No, I said, our policy is to help you get somewhere safe. There it was again. Safe. The word did not soften them. My father looked toward the fireplace, where a man in a sweater had given his chair to an elderly guest, and now stood with a blanket over his shoulders. My father saw a room full of people receiving care, and somehow it offended him that care did not become a sweet when it reached him. We can pay, he said. I understand. Do you? Yes. The simplicity of that answer irritated him. Before he could speak again, my mother turned back toward the wall behind Theo. The key, she said. My pulse changed. Theo glanced at me once. I did not look away from my mother. She took one small step closer to the desk, staring at the glass case. Where did you get that? Her voice had lost some of its performance. Something underneath had come through, not warmth, not grief. Recognition beginning in the wrong place. It belonged to the original guest house, I said. My father's attention sharpened. What guest house? The one this property was built from. My mother's hand moved to her throat. The gesture was so familiar I almost felt 14 again. Her fingers touched the place where her necklace usually sat, as if discomfort was something delicate that needed supporting. That looks like, she began. Then she stopped. My father looked from the key to me. What was the original owner's name? I let the question rest between us for 1 second. My grandmother owned the guest house before me. Not your mother. My grandmother. The distinction landed. I saw it reach him. His face did not change much, but his eyes did. They became still. My mother turned back to me slowly. This time she actually looked. Not at my jacket. Not at my rolls. At my face. I watched her search for the child she had left outside, and for one strange moment I wanted her to find me before money entered the room. Before pride, before calculation. I wanted 1 clean second of horror. Just one. Instead, she whispered, Relly. I had not heard that name in 15 years. She used to say it when people were watching. My father looked at me again. No, that was his first word after recognizing me. Not my name. Not an apology. Just denial. My mother's eyes filled quickly, too quickly, the way they always had when tears were useful. Relindis. I kept my voice even. Yes. Theo became very still beside the desk. Guests nearby had gone quiet without pretending not to listen anymore. A woman near the fireplace lowered her mug. Someone's phone stopped playing a video. Outside, the storm pushed against the glass doors like a hand testing the building. My father recovered first. You work here. I own it. His jaw moved. That's impossible. It is. My mother stepped closer. We thought. She stopped, pressed her lips together, then began again. We didn't know where you were. That was almost funny. Not funny enough to laugh. You had case numbers, I said quietly. School contacts, Marin's address, legal notices later. My father's eyes flicked toward the guests. Lower your voice. I had not raised it. That was the first thing people like him did when facts entered a public room. They treated the facts like bad manners. My mother tried another shape. We worried about you every winter. Every winter. The words reached the part of me that had once sat at a bus stop counting headlights. I looked at the snow melting from the hem of her coat onto my lobby floor. Did you? Her tears trembled but did not fall. You were our daughter. I was 14. My father exhaled through his nose. It was a difficult night. Theo's hand shifted on the counter. I saw it. My father did not. A difficult night, I repeated. My mother's voice softened. Families make mistakes. That sentence moved through the lobby colder than the air outside. I thought of my grandmother's note. Some doors should never depend on the people standing on the other side of them. My father leaned in slightly. Whatever happened then, this is now. Your mother is freezing, we need a room. There are no rooms. You just said you own the hotel. Yes. Then make one. I will not displace a guest during a storm. We're not strangers, my mother said. That was the first time she used blood as a key. I looked at her. No, you're not. For one moment, neither of them knew what to do with the answer. Then my father's anger found a new path. We heard rumors about this place, he said, that it had been built out of the old guest house. I didn't believe it. I waited. He continued, because silence always made him uncomfortable when he could not control it. There were questions about that property, there always were. There were documents, I said. His eyes hardened. You were a child. Yes. You had help. Yes. My mother's tears finally spilled. Marin, she said, and her voice changed on the name. Small, bitter. Still wounded by a woman who had done what she had not. She turned you against us. No, I said, she found me. A guest near the sofa drew in a quiet breath. My father noticed. He shifted again, smoothing his expression into something more public. Relindis, this is not the place. You asked for the owner. His face flushed. I am asking my daughter to show basic decency. There it was. Daughter. Not when he saw me. Not when he learned I was alive and well, and standing in front of him. Only when he needed something. My mother reached toward the edge of the desk as if she needed support. We can talk upstairs, she said, privately, please. There is no upstairs room available. You have an office. No, the word was soft. It was also final. My father stared at me. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying Theo can arrange hot drinks, blankets, and safe transportation to an affiliated motel if rooms are still available. If not, he can coordinate with the warming center. My mother looked wounded. You would send your own parents to a warming center. I would make sure 2 stranded people are not left outside. My father gave a short laugh. You hear yourself, after everything we went through. I studied him then, really studied him. The lines around his mouth, the wet shoulders of his coat, the expensive gloves he had removed and placed on my front desk without asking. The indignation of a man who still believed inconvenience was an injustice if it happened to him. What did you go through? I asked. His eyes narrowed. You disappeared. I felt the lobby recede for half a second. No, I said, I survived. My mother covered her mouth. Whether from shock or strategy, I could not tell anymore. My father lowered his voice. Be careful. Theo's head turned slightly. I held my father's gaze. With what? With how this looks, he said. A successful woman refusing shelter to her aging parents in a blizzard. People enjoy stories like that. There was the threat. Cleanly dressed. Publicly acceptable. My mother whispered Conrad, but again not to stop him, only to make him softer. He kept going. You think a hotel like this can survive bad publicity, reviews, legal questions about how you obtain this property? The room tightened. Even the fire seemed quieter. I could feel staff looking toward me from the restaurant entrance. Victor stood near the hall to maintenance, pretending to check a thermostat. Olma had appeared at the edge of the dining room with a towel in her hands. My parents saw an audience and thought it gave them leverage. They did not understand what kind of place they were standing in. Ilara turned toward the listening guests just enough. We just want somewhere warm, she said, her voice breaking. That's all. No, I thought. That had never been all. Theo looked at me. This time the question in his face was not about rooms. It was about boundaries. I gave him the smallest nod. He reached for the phone. My father noticed immediately. Who are you calling? Theo's hand paused over the receiver. I looked at him, then at the framed brass key behind the desk. The key caught the firelight, bright and old and steady. Call Marin, I said. My mother's face changed. Theo picked up the phone. The line began to ring. The phone rang 3 times. Those 3 rings felt longer than the 15 years that had brought me there. My father kept his eyes on Theo, as if he could still make the phone call stop through disapproval alone. My mother had gone very pale, not fainting pale, remembering pale. On the 4th ring, Theo said, Marin, it's Theo at the front desk. I'm sorry to call during the storm. He listened. Then his eyes moved to me. Yes, she's here. A pause. And they are too. My mother made a small sound. My father turned toward me. You had no right to bring her into this. I looked at him. She was already in it. Theo held the phone out. I did not take it. Speaker, please, I said. His thumb pressed the button. For a second, there was only the faint sound of weather on the other end of the line. Then Marin's voice filled the space between the desk and the fireplace. Relindis. I had not realized how tightly I was holding myself until I heard her say my name. I'm here, I said. Her voice was older than it had been the night she found me, softer around the edges now, but steady, still the kind of voice that made a room behave. Are you safe? My father gave a humorless laugh. That is an absurd question. Marin did not answer him. She waited for me. Yes, I said, I'm safe. Only then did she speak again. Good. That one word changed the lobby. Not dramatically, no one gasped, no music swelled, but the balance shifted. My parents had filled the room with pressure. Marin brought in fact. Conrad stepped closer to the desk. Marin, this is a private family matter. No, she said. It stopped being private when a 14-year-old girl was found freezing at a bus stop. My mother closed her eyes. My father's jaw tightened. That is not what happened. It is exactly what happened, Marin said. Her voice did not rise. That made it harder to fight. She was 14, her coat was wet through, she had no gloves, her hands were stiff around a brass key. She could barely answer basic questions when I found her. My throat tightened, but I did not speak. For once, I did not have to make the pain understandable. Someone else was holding the record. My father said she left the house. Marin answered, children do not leave warm houses in blizzards because they enjoy bus stops. The silence after that was clean. Sharp. A guest near the fireplace looked down at her cup. Victor stopped pretending to adjust the thermostat. Alma's towel hung still in her hand. My mother began crying. Quietly, of course. The way she had always cried when witnesses were present. I was scared too, she said. No one understands what that night was like. I looked at her then. Really looked. Her eyes were wet, her cheeks trembled, but there was still a shape under the tears, an old shape, a hand reaching for comfort before accountability. Marin said, I understand what it was like, I drove through it. My mother's face changed. A little anger flickered through the hurt. You took my daughter. No, Marin said, I took a cold child out of a storm. My father lifted one hand. This is ridiculous. We came here because we were stranded. We came here asking for help. Instead, we are being humiliated in public. You threatened my staff, I said. His eyes snapped back to mine. I warned you about consequences. Yes. I glanced at Theo. He had already opened the incident log on the computer. His hands moved quietly over the keyboard. Time, names, weather status, offered alternatives, guest conduct, threats made. Marin had taught me that too. Records are not revenge. They are doors that cannot be rewritten. My father saw Theo typing. What is he doing? Documenting, I said. For what? For accuracy. He laughed again, but there was less confidence in it. Do you think documentation changes family? No, I said, it protects people from what family sometimes does. My mother wiped under one eye. Relly, please. The nickname landed softer this time, but not better. We're sorry, she said. I waited. She took a small step toward me. We're sorry if that night hurt you. We were overwhelmed. Your father was under pressure. I should have handled it differently. You should have. Differently. Words built to leave the center untouched. Then she added, but we are here now, and we're cold, and we have nowhere else decent to go. Can't we speak somewhere private? There it was. The apology was not a door opening. It was a tool looking for a lock. No, I said. Her face crumpled. My father's expression hardened again. You always were stubborn. Marin's voice came through the speaker, Conrad. He froze. She did not say anything else. Just his name. Like a hand placed flat on a table. He turned away from the phone. I want the contact information for your attorney, he said to me. There were irregularities with that property. Your grandmother was not in her right mind near the end. The lobby went colder in a way the storm could not explain. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides. The trust was reviewed, recorded, and upheld years ago. Any legal communication can go through counsel. You hid behind strangers and paperwork. No, I said, I was protected by them. He stared at me. For the first time that night, he seemed to understand that anger was not moving me. That was when he began to look tired. Not sorry. Just tired of not winning. I turned to Theo. Call the affiliated motel. Already checking, he said. That made my father look at him again, as if noticing too late that Theo had never been uncertain. Theo spoke into the desk phone now, calm and professional. Yes, this is the Alder House Hotel. We need one room under our severe weather agreement if you still have availability. 2 adults, shuttle preferred through the south route. He listened, then nodded. Thank you, please hold it under emergency transfer. My mother whispered a motel. I looked at her. A warm room. She flinched because there was no cruelty in it. That was the part she could not use. I continued, the hotel will cover one night. Theo will provide hot drinks while you wait. You can take blankets for the shuttle. In the morning, the motel staff can help you contact road services. My father said, "You expect us to accept charity from you." "No, I expect you to accept shelter." He looked toward the guests again, searching for the angle that would make me look harsh. There was none. I had not raised my voice. I had not put them outside. I had not given them what they wanted. Those were three different things, and he hated that I knew the difference. Security appeared near the side hall, quietly, one person, not a scene, just presence. My father saw him. "This is unnecessary." "Yes," I said, "it is." He understood. "Not everything." "Enough." Theo printed the motel confirmation and placed it on the desk beside 2 paper cups of tea. Alma stepped forward and set a small bag there too. "Bread and soup," she said, "for the road." My mother looked at the bag like it was an accusation. It was not. That made it heavier. Marin's voice softened through the phone. "Relindis." I turned slightly toward the speaker. "You did what needed doing," she said. My father put on his gloves with stiff, angry movements. My mother took the tea but did not drink it. At the doors, she looked back once. For 1 second, I saw the question in her face. Not the question I had wanted for years. Not, "How could we have done that?" Only, "Are you really not coming after us?" I did not. The shuttle lights appeared through the glass, blurred by snow. Theo walked them to the entrance but did not go outside. The driver helped them in. My father spoke to him with the same clipped authority he had used on everyone else. Then the door slid shut. The shuttle pulled away slowly, red taillights fading into the storm. I stood there until I could not see them anymore. I did not feel powerful. That surprised me, even though maybe it should not have. I felt tired. And sad. A little girl inside me had waited 15 years for her parents to say, "We were wrong." They had come back asking for a room. Behind me, the lobby began to breathe again. A cup touched a saucer, someone whispered. The fire shifted and cracked softly. Theo came to stand beside me, not too close. "Are you okay?" I looked at the glass doors. "No," I said. Then, after a moment, "But I'm all right." He nodded like he understood the difference. Marin was still on the phone. I picked it up from the desk and took it off speaker. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "Do you remember what your grandmother told you?" I closed my eyes. "A room key means someone thought you were worth keeping warm." "Yes," Marin said, "and you were." After we hung up, I walked to the framed brass key. It rested behind glass, small and worn and ordinary to anyone who did not know what it had survived. I did not open the case. I only stood there. For years, I had thought the hotel was proof that I had made it out. That night, I understood it differently. It was not built to prove my parents wrong. It was built because my grandmother had prepared a door for me. Because Marin had stopped in the snow. Because warmth, real warmth, was never supposed to be a reward for obedience. Outside, the storm kept moving across the mountains. Inside, the fire stayed steady. The old key caught the light behind the front desk. And for the first time in my life, I turned away from the door without wondering whether someone would let me back in. I was already home.